Welcome back to another episode of Psycosmos. Today we have Bret, and we're just going to discuss a wide variety of esoteric related topics. Stay tuned for more. Thanks, Bret. I really appreciate you kind of making some time. Bret actually reached out to us via our contact email, which you can find on our channel. It's in our link tree and everything. So anybody who wants to kind of reach out, you can see we got some stuff in the back here as far as the new studio that we're setting up, because we're going to be doing a wide variety of new content that we're going to be rolling out shortly. But either way, Bret was nice enough to reach out to me, and we after much patience from his end, because I had to keep rescheduling, we're finally gonna just discuss whatever. So yeah, Bret, why don't you take it away, introduce yourself, and kind of talk about some topics that you like to discuss.
Sure. Okay. My name is Bret. I'm self-taught JavaScript developer or web developer. I've been working in the field for actively for about 5 years now, and I've been doing tech stuff for about 15 years, just almost 15 years now. It was about, I would say, 5 or 6 years ago that I started getting involved with the Magic community, and that's not Magic the Gathering. I did play Magic the Gathering as a kid.
Yeah,
Uh, as more recently, it's been the Magic with a K. And my love for technology, my interest in magic and spirituality had a nice overlap, I found. And I also found, and this is kind of the key takeaway, is that there's a lot of people who find the same thing.
mm-hmm.
It's a growing, it's a regenerating, revitalizing, self-vitalizing movement similar to the 90s in terms of technology and spirituality in today's world. And AI is just supercharged the whole conversation. So that's kind of me in a nutshell and what I'd like to talk about. We can also talk about transhumanism if you'd like. That's something that I find to be philosophically appealing to me.
Sure.
But whatever you want to do from this point forward, it's your show. So go for it.
Cool. Awesome. Actually, I loved all the different topics that you kind of pressed on. I'd love to know more about your involvement. Just, as an initial start, we can discuss your involvement in the magic community and, your interests around that, if you want to take it away.
Sure. Let's see. I got my start with magic when I first picked up a book by Andrew. I think his name is Andrei Vitamis. He wrote a book called Chaos Magic, something Chaos Magic Explained or something to that extent.
Mm-hmm.
And when I picked that book up, I realized very quickly that this is something, the magic community, it exists. My thinking isn't too abstract, and there are people who have already kind of paved a way for me to get into the magic community. So I went online and I found our occult on Reddit. That was my big turning point when I realized there was an entire universe of people who are actively involved in magic and occultism and paganism and spirituality, the whole caboodle. And then I started experimenting with technology and magic more intentionally and founded a subreddit myself, our Cyberdelanaut, which kind of fuses the integration of psychedelics, technology, and occultism or magic into one kind of conversation. And it's been a lot of uphill battle in terms of kind of committing myself to it, without knowing there was a community behind it. But now that I know there are thousands of people, minimum thousands of people on the internet that are interested in this subject, it's become very easy for me to continue moving forward. My studies have kind of blossomed recently. I've moved into a new apartment, and so you say you've moved studios, so I can definitely appreciate the difficulties and the benefits of doing that. But it's been a eye-opening journey over the last 5 or 6 years, and I can get into specifics if you'd like.
Yeah.
But
Please do take it into what's the practical application, if you could share, that you feel you've been able to apply to your own lifestyle, to utilize the laws of nature. And just as like a precursor too for everybody watching, when my friend Bret here is talking about magic with a K, we're really talking about how to fundamentally understand the laws of nature and how to apply the, I guess you could say, manipulation of the laws of nature in order to get a realistic outcome that is something tangible. A great example of magic that everybody does, no matter where you're from or who you are, is speech. So speech is a manipulation of vibrational frequencies, and it's also in kind of a metaphysical sense, it's almost telepathic, because as I'm speaking words, you're hearing them and processing them at real time. It happens within microseconds, but the words that I'm speaking out of my mouth are actually penetrating your conscious and your subconscious at the same time. So just language in general, the creation of language, the utilization of different sounds in order to strike a specific frequency. This is actually how all languages were developed, thousands of years ago, or just over the thousands of years that has led up to this period of time. So using, we kind of take that for granted, but if you tell somebody, go get me that thing, and then they get up and they go and they get it and bring it to you, you put in almost zero effort, and you were able to actually have something come to you into your hand. It sounds like very, very simplified, because it is, but it's something that everybody does. It's a form, just language in itself is a form of magic, from the standpoint of what we're talking about, just so that people are not against the idea. It's not, I mean, Bret, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you got big red stars and crayon on your wall and blood dripping down, because that's what I think there's a big stereotype in that sense of what magic is, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about understanding. It's really scientific. It's really understanding how things like light particles or vibrational frequencies work in order to increase the amount of perceived outcomes that you want within your reality. So anyway, I'll let you take it away. Any type of practical applications that you've been able to kind of use in your life, I'd love to hear that, because I always love to hear people's experiences.
That's a great question. It's a great question. And I would say there are two immediate practical applications to technology and magic in my life. One is divination, which is definitely it's a way of subtly telling the future, or kind of getting a sense of what's coming. And you can even use it for the past as well, or the present for that matter. So divination with technology, and you can use that in any number of ways. And the second way I would say would be the performance of media itself, how human emotions and intention influence the performance of media that you produce and release to the internet. Yeah. I'm surprised at how almost measurable, and in fact, that's the analytics that I rely on to determine if my vibe, quote unquote, is impacting the media I'm releasing, is measurement. So it's very much measurable, but it's divination, or performance of media. And there was a third one that I was going to mention, coding itself, actually using like sacred numbers and coding projects, or building websites on certain ratios and specifications. Very interesting, very useful, and very result oriented habits, or hobbies, I guess you could call them.
And I love everything that you said, and because for some people at home who might not know this, I'm going to actually play off of your point with the technology. So I actually have my bachelor's degree in information technology. That's what I went to school for. That's actually what initially started me on a lot of this journey, because initially I said I needed to have, this was back, we're talking almost a decade ago when I was in college, but I said to myself, I need to have some form of a degree that's going to be substantial and last, because I was putting myself through college, and I was coming from absolutely nothing, and I just wanted to make sure I had some form of stability in my life. Studying technology made me realize a lot more about the scientifics of how the technology works. It's something that's really overlooked, but even something as simple as Wi-Fi, almost everybody in the Western world has it, but people have absolutely no idea how it actually works. They just think, oh, well, there's waves around and our phone does this and this and this. If you have a cell phone, if you've used a computer or anything to that degree, you are a user of magic. You take your phone, and your phone is this little black cube that you can type little questions into and get, an answer. Not necessarily these days with search engines, will it be a completely honest answer or a completely factual answer? Because again, that goes into what Bret was saying with the manipulation of social media, different outcomes. You can really almost rewrite reality or history as you know it if you have control over specific technologies, because things become a hive mind, and even facts can be distorted. And that's actually how we've had a lot of fake history over the last couple thousands of years. Not even just fake history, but just unknown history, because people didn't have source material. They didn't have a way to prove specific things, even if they were true. Now with the internet, it's people put a lot of faith into it, but there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of issues with it. But at the end of the day, you're creating almost you're almost creating what's known as an egregore. It's like a manifestation of energy, which can lead into almost a physical thing. This is actually how a lot of religions have come about. But anyway, technology itself, phones, as a great example, they utilize a lot of crystals and metal in the technology in order to create different types of waves or frequencies or connect to different things. And a lot of it, actually, even going back to radios, televisions, they use things like quartz crystals. So when you're using a phone, the physical part that makes most of it up is metals and crystals. What is it? What do they call them? Like IR receivers and stuff in radios, going all the way back to the older days. They all run on these invisible frequencies that all of these devices are able to pick up on and transfer energy and information through. And if you learn more about for the people at home, if you learn more about the way that they send packets of data and information, it's really just information that's encased in light particles that these devices are able to interpret. So after I started going down that kind of rabbit hole, I started to realize who really owns these technology companies, who really owns the big business companies. What do they believe in? Are they going to church? Are they going to temple or mosque? And no, the answer is no. None of these people are really doing any of those things. They're really into this kind of stuff. They're really into occult. They're really into esoteric studies. And that's where I started to piece together a lot of different truths that were kind of going against the grain of what social media and what the masses really understood or believed. So for me personally, I wanted to have the practical information on what are powerful people really doing, because I know they're all using technology. They need it for marketing, they need it for sales, they need it for running their businesses with operations, they need it for making big decisions. They need data. So many companies now are just, they'll spend millions of dollars just on one department that will just collect data, and it doesn't even make any money for the business. They just want the data. So you have to ask yourself, what are they doing with that information? But that all of these questions started to culminate, and this is actually how I started getting into things like magic, things like the esoterics. I basically went from, okay, what do the people at the top of the hierarchy in our society actually believe? What do they fundamentally know? And it's stuff to make stuff like this, which are phones and computers and things that we buy and we spend all of our money and energy on, because money is energy. And so we're spending all of our money on these devices, and they're magic. They're magic. You can type in things and get questions. You can play games. You can manipulate all these different things, touch screens, all of this stuff. This is, if you were to take this thousands of years ago, basically any point in time before 100 years ago, they probably would have hung you up on a tree because of you being some kind of demon or a wizard or something, whereas to us, it's so normalized. Not to mention even that things like motherboards and certain parts even have little weird schematics that look very eerily similar to sigils that were drawn and different like magical symbols from over the last thousands of years from a wide variety of different cultures. So I'm kind of rambling at this point, but the point I'm getting at is that, a lot of it makes total sense that you had that kind of same connection that I did, having that technological background, getting into the esoterics, because technology is magic no matter how you perceive it. It is magic. It's a way in which we manipulate the physics and the sciences of everything that exists around us in order to make our lives easier, to make our lives better, or just to get some kind of expected outcome. So sorry for the really long-winded response, but really well said, everything that you've been saying. I'd love to hear more about how you've applied a lot of this stuff to your own personal life, because I have as well. I feel like a lot of some of the more what people I guess consider like white magic or more tantric magic is really related to things that have to do with the neurological system in the body. Um, Quick segue. I feel as though the things that utilize electricity in the magical items that we have is the same electricity that you can utilize in your own body, right? To get those specific outcomes, and everything from your thoughts, your feelings, even the way you perceive your entire reality around you, it's all signals. It's all electrical signals. A lot of people think it's chemically based, but the signals are actually what occur before the chemicals are released, because the chemicals only are released from jostling, and the jostling comes from vibrations. So any part in your body that is secreting chemicals, in order for you to feel things, first has to have an energetic catalyst first. It moves at the speed of light. You see something, it gives you a response, and then it jiggles those chemicals. So people think it's very chemically based, but it's really not. It's the real initial root of it, as almost everything is that the Planck level of physics is all vibrations. So I'm talking a lot, but I'm just kind of I'm over explaining this stuff for viewers at home who don't really understand like the intricacies of what it means when we're talking about magic, because we're talking about it on a much more metaphysical sense, and they're again probably thinking we have our eyes rolled in the back of our heads writing red crayon and blood all over the wall or something like that. People don't understand that they do magic with a K every single day, and most of which is like white or gray magic. I'm not talking about like black magic, but that's like the big distinction. And I like what your approach is, because I've talked with a lot of different people who study a bunch of different things, and there are just some things I think that really should just ultimately be stayed away from completely. But things like divination using technology, yeah, like if you, let's say you're a stockbroker, you use technology, you Google, what do I think this stock is going to go, you're using divination to figure out where this thing is going to be, so you can either make money or even potentially lose money. So that's like a great example of something where people do it every day. Oh, did you check the weather app? Guess what, you just use technology for divination. You wanted to look into the future to see what the weather was going to be. You weren't able to do that not even 30, 40, 50 years ago. You'd have 50 years ago you're watching the Weather Channel. It's the same thing on the television. I mean, come on. They put it right in front of your face without you even really noticing it. Now it's so in front of our face, people are waking up to like, this is weird. But anyway, I just gave like a whole 10-minute spiel there. I apologize about that. I'm going to pass it back to you. I'd love for you to talk more about incorporating some of the things I had just said to your practical application of it. We can also talk about transhumanism later in this as well. I like that topic as well, but I'll pass it back to you. I get very rambly and lectury when I get really passionate about topics like this. So I just appreciate you kind of opening the door for us to talk about these types of things. But yeah, I'll pass it back to you. I love to hear about the divination, like some of the practical application of in ways in which like it's helped you or it's helped other people that things that you've seen online, stuff like that. So I'll let you talk.
Sure. Divination in particular, I would say, is the most immediately available form of magic and technology. At least when you're trying to do it unconsciously, you can do magic all the time, as you just said. But divination, I've used and built random number generators, pseudo random number generators. I've done keyword finders within bodies of text where it just randomly picks out like 20 keywords, puts them together in an amalgamation, and then you can divine from that, or you can use divination from that kind of information. I have seen divination change people's lives in the sense of the products that come from that, the outcomes that come from that, with when people come together and practice like tarot over the internet. That's, I mean, it's there's a lot that can be said. It's like the digital environment is in of itself its own space, its own, some would call it its own spiritual domain. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I will say that through that space, what is done in person not only can be decentralized around the world and then brought together in a like a Zoom call like this. You're located where you are, I'm located where I am. We definitely aren't near each other, and it could be anywhere, anytime that we are having this conversation. That kind of time travel, that kind of dislocated time travel sort of divination, someone could take a message away from this video from the stack of items in the back right of your corner of your screen. There could be a pattern there that they find interesting and intriguing, or the color of my sweater, or anything of that sort. The point is that the opportunity for divination is there like it's never been there before, because of the doors that have been opened through the ability to come together at distant and distinct locations. I have practiced divination myself for probably I'd say 3, 4, 5 years, but I've seen people who've been doing it their entire lives take computer programs and generate images out of characters like A through Z, that look like actual, like someone's face on the screen, and divine from a sort of form of bibliomancy based on that. I mean, the ways that you can use divination technology are endless, and so powerful, so very, very powerful and telling. And if you're not, I find divination to be so powerful that I limit the number of times that I do it in a given month or so, because, like, for instance, I only look at tarot cards once a year at the very beginning, because they're so, in my opinion, they're so powerful that it's to respect the energy of the tool, and not to become not only over reliant on it, but to get too much information.
That's right. And that's really smart. I just want to plug, that's very, very intelligent to do that when you're playing with things like that, for sure.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing comes to technology itself. When I'm, for instance, if I'm building a computer program or a website, which are ultimately the same thing, but if I'm building some software or an application, and I use numbers like 23, or I use numbers like 13, 10, 7, the program itself inherits the value of those whole numbers, and I find that the program is a little more special, if you will, because it relies on values that are hard coded in, that are directly affiliated with spiritual and you could say psychic outcomes. So it's about the approach that you take to technology, and if you have the intention to create magic with technology, it will happen, whether or not you are mindful of it or not. Like you said, and when you said that speech is magic, that is 100%. Words are spells, and it is I think, as you pointed out, underappreciated. And the same thing goes for coding languages. The same thing goes for graphical user interfaces. The interacting with logic, energy, and light creates outcomes. That's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, 100%. I wanna tag along on a few points that you made, because you made a lot of excellent points, especially surrounding the intricacies of understanding your power as a human being, and understanding the energy which is attached to these things that you experiment with in life. For example, children, as they get older, one of the first forms of magic on the same topic that they learn is language. They have to learn a form of language in order to manipulate the outcomes around them. A baby is only going to get so far, even as it advances to a toddler. If a toddler and a young child does not learn how to speak, we consider this a problem, because now they can't interact fully at the full capacity of which they could, manipulating their environment. But if a baby is speaking words at a really young age, we consider this a very good thing. We say, wow, this is really impressive. This baby's so intelligent. It's able to manipulate things around it really well, because it has that ability of speech. Coding languages are just speech. It's just a way in which we've created another language, but it's a language where it's that has a very physical outcome, because we are coding, we're creating things. So I even remember, I reflect on when I was really big into coding, and this was probably like, I don't know, probably like at the very least 8 years ago. I was really good with Python. That was one of my favorites. And just being able to sit there, you can code things, you can create this form of outcome. You can type things in with your hands. It's all thoughts that are in here that I'm then putting into this device, which is also running on code because somebody else coded that device to work on that parameter. And now I'm sitting here creating something else. And this is, of course, where we can kind of segue into that conversation on AI, transhumanism. Where is humanity going? Well, I mean, this is the thing that we really have to keep in mind here is just like Bret was saying, tarot cards are a great example. Tarot is a lot of fun and it's a very, very powerful mechanism. It's not something that I do very often at all. Like you said, maybe a few times a year. And that's only because with tarot is not only does tarot have the energy that's affiliated with it, which has been projected onto it by all the other human beings throughout all of history. It's the same with the numbers that you had mentioned. All of these numbers not only have these attributes and properties to them inherently, but they've gained more power as we've understood and interacted with them as time has moved on. So numbers do have power, words have power, sounds, just the simple just the simplicity behind sounds that your mouth is able to make has power. It has the ability to you say specific words, which are just sounds in different orders in a specific set way, which you understand, again, almost at a telepathic speed. It's an amazement that we even have that, to be able to utilize that as a functionality throughout all the evolution that we've had so far to this very point. All the evolutions that we've had of all the languages too, to be able to be at this point in time, and where we're going with that. But with that comes some dangers, right? Because it's a balance of tradition versus progression. Tradition is stable, but it's also rigid and it's not very flexible. Progression is very flexible and it's very forward thinking, but because of that, sometimes it can lack that stability. People forget the original stability of what even led to the ability to have that progression. And we're seeing that in our society today. We're seeing that where great example, Mr. Musk is coming out with the Neuralink where the chip's going to go in the brain. I'm kind of against that idea. One of the reasons why I'm against that idea to a specific extent is because of it's not even like I'm fully against it. I need to see how that interacts with the light body of the human being. The light body, the energetic body that we have is what it allows us to even have the conscious thoughts or the subconscious thoughts that we gain from things like manifestation or divination, or even something as simple as reading tarot. If you get a basic 3-card past, present, future, standard reading, whatever, 3-card reading with tarot, I have seen people really not respect the cards, and they will have bad outcomes because what they're doing is they're rejecting an energy. It's just an energy that is associated with those cards. All these other people who are really tapped into this type of magic and energy are associating their energy with these cards. And if you, whether you respect it or not, the underlying ability of these tarot cards really lies within the energy that's attached to them and the way that our subconscious energy perceives those things. So if I get my future card as the World or the Wheel of Fortune, I might be put into an energetic state of saying, well, I got that card as my future. That means that my future is going to be really good. It's going to be positive, which will then, because I feel that way, will ultimately manifest that into my reality. If I get the Tower, which is considered one of the worst cards in the whole tarot, well, then, now I might be put into a state of paranoia, which will ultimately bring out that issue, right? That will ultimately bring out that issue. So that's where we kind of come into the topic of the Neuralink, the AI, and the transhumanism, changing the physical body, putting on robotic parts and things like that. It will have some form of an effect on the energetic body of the person. That can harm the soul. Basically, we know that the soul is a form of energy. It's what interacts with a lot of things. So how that's going to be perceived and how that's going to make a change over these coming years will time will tell. I'm not like staunchly against anything specifically. If we can use technology to not harm us and help us in different ways, then that's fine. I'm all for it. But at the same time, we've already seen the negative impacts of people who are addicted to social media. We've seen the negative impacts of people who get sucked into that energy. It's almost like a void to some degree. What happens when you start putting that stuff inside of you? That's where that's where greater complications can come. So that was just kind of my big point, around it. Again, I'm not staunchly against it, but initially I'm kind of hesitant because I'm like, okay, well, how is that going to interact with the way that we are able to manifest? What if you put a chip in your brain and now you can't manifest anymore because you're almost detached from an energetic basis? You have a chip that's stealing all of the energy that would normally your brain and your neurological body would be using. Well, that power's got to come from somewhere to power these things. So it has to come from you, unless you're going to hook you up to a battery, in which case it's also really unhealthy to a certain degree too. So it's there's a real fine line between that tradition and progression. I want the healthy progression. Unfortunately, because of how powerful technology is, to your point, it's something that I think we need a lot more testing. But anyway, that's my big point. I'd love to hear what you think too on it.
It was interesting when you mentioned the light body and the implantation of technology. I haven't honestly considered that before, and that's an interesting perspective. I have studied Kundalini a little bit. I have studied you could say the human energy body, or at least experience the human energy body. That is an interesting. I'm gonna have to do some reflection on that topic, because that is something I haven't considered. But let's assume that let's assume for a second that it's neutral, that the implementation of technology and the light body overlap and it's cohesive and all that. I would that would be an ideal outcome.
Yes.
But let's assume that it's not positive, and that it does siphon off energy from the human body, and Neuralink does more damage than good. That would be kind of an apocalypse. That would kind of be a bit of a problem, a bit of a big problem. That's interesting. Now, what I would wonder is, regardless of if it's negative, neutral, or positive relationships between the Neuralink and the human energy body, what kind of data flow goes between the two of them? That's what I would really want to know.
Yep.
Is what kind of energy and information moves between the two, and what kind of indicators can Neuralink pick up about human changes, human physiology, and all that. And it's not Neuralink itself that's the one and done. It's neurological implantation in general. It's brain chips in general that I would be curious about, what kind of information flow comes from the human or the subject to the database they're connected to. That would be fascinating.
Yeah, for sure, because it opens up my brain a little bit to think, just bringing up your topic, which is a really, really great question to have, that I don't even really think I've thought too extensively on. But my one thought that I've had around it, but that I've had before this conversation, is, if you put something in your brain, can't they just beam ideas into your brain? Well, then next thing now you have wars that are being fought because you have people hacking into people's brains, sending them to grocery stores to go shoot people up or whatever. What's the real complexity? What's the in-depth, limits of this, really? And that's where that's really only where my brain starts kind of sending out red flags. It says, okay, well, what's the limit? Like, if you put a chip in your brain, what are you functionally trying to get out of it, and how do you perceive that won't be negatively impacting you, whether it's next year or 10 years down the line? That's really, I wish we had more data. I sound kind of like those mega corporations now, but I wish we had more data on how we could utilize technology into the body. And at the very least, I don't think that we should start with the brain, especially with, like you said, neurological implants. We should start really, really simple, go for something like arms and hands. We already have the capability to do similar things. I know that there are kids who are amputees that they can have these like robotic arms that read the signals, like in the well, for lack of a better word, the stubs that they have. It's the amputated sections of their body, and they're able to read the neurological inputs that, so the kid can do like stuff like that, which is very fascinating to me. I think that is the way that we need to think about transhumanism moving forward. And I think that anything having to do with a lot of the neurological body, I cannot perceive it. I'll give you a great example. Fiber optic cable. Okay. Fiber optic cable is it's basically like a neural, it's a long neuron. It sends data through packets by reflecting it through like this little mirror chamber. It's almost kind of similar. The way that I see fiber optic cable is almost like they copied the neurological body of the human and wanted to create something like that was like that, where it almost worked at instant speed, the speed of light, because you know the previous cables weren't doing that. But my thing with fiber optic cable is, if people didn't know, if you have that light beam shoot out of it and that fiber optic cable doesn't have a means to be able to catch the data, you know, generally speaking, that would be like your router. I'm kind of putting this into simplified terms. That beam of light can travel very far distances, and when it has like that final output, if it's not tempered correctly, it can like shoot a beam of light that can actually burn through paper. It can burn through different things. And there's a lot of ways that can go wrong. But most of the time they have all these different fail safes for that, but it's still possible. So my whole idea around that is, what happens when you start opening up the neurological body and putting things into it, catalysts, different things that might be able to either, again, absorb your neurological inputs, or they might be able to exacerbate them. If at any degree, if you have too much power, too much energy in your neurological body, it can cause damage. And if you have too little, it can cause damage. So it has to be this balance. If you have too much, I see people all the time, raise your frequency, raise your frequency, raise your vibration. It's like, yes, you want to do that substantially throughout your whole life. However, it is also important for the energy to come back down every once in a while, so because everything is like a wave, it needs to refresh. You can't have a computer running at full speed all the time. Eventually it has to be shut down and updated and rebooted, right? Just the way that you have to sleep and stuff. But there are people who are really fascinated with this stuff and they want to go all the time. It's like, well, now you're just burning yourself out, and you can do that. You can burn out your neurons. So you know, the way I see it is, at least it's a possibility, but I know that we are kind of getting up on time here. I'd love to do a part two with you. I didn't expect this one to be so short, but if you'd love, I'd love to do a part two with you and discuss more. I kind of talked a lot this session. I apologize about that, because I kind of get rambly with these podcasts sometimes, but I would love to hear more from your perspectives and more of your insights, because I can tell that you and I kind of had a very similar path on finding a lot of this stuff. Technology is magic, whether people know it or not. And once you start getting into that headspace in that realm, you start to respect it even a lot more. You know, I used to be the type of kid 10 years ago sitting on the computer all the time. Now I'm like, nah, I know that if I sit there for way too long, you know, or whatever, even if I'm working on a big project, it can be, you know, detrimental to your health in a specific way, you know, or something like that. So it's more of understanding that balance with nature, right? But yeah, I loved having you, and this was a really great conversation. Again, I apologize that I rambled so much, but I'd love to have you on for a part two if you'd be interested. So yeah, why don't you tell the people how they can follow you, if you have any social media that maybe you want to give a shout out to?
Sure, you can find me on YouTube and on LinkedIn. I Yep, YouTube and LinkedIn are my primary platforms these days.
Awesome. But yeah, Bret, thank you again so much. I want to make sure that I get you before it might kick us off here, but thank you. I would love to have a part two if you want to do one maybe next week, and we can dive into any other types of topics that you wanted to discuss. This was enlightening for me, so I enjoyed you know, just chit chatting. But thank you again for your time today. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and part two would be great.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah.